Hello and welcome to the final video 11 of Life Unlimited, 10 Steps to Real Change. And what I'm going to cover in this video is the last two steps. So step 9, which is choose your boundaries, and step 10, which is a focus on communication. Both so important, boundaries and communication, as issues psychologically, both in relationship with self, of course, how we communicate with ourselves and hold boundaries ourselves with ourselves, and also in relationship with other people. But I will focus a lot on boundaries with others and communication with others, which is why they follow the connection with others video. So first, looking at choosing your boundaries. So to look at what boundaries are, they're talked about a lot in well-being, very importantly as well, because they are the things that keep us safe in relationship with other people. You can see them as the guidelines or limits that we create to ground what we see as reasonable ways for other people to behave towards us, and therefore what we will do if and say if other people cross those boundaries. So they're so important to keep us safe in relationship with other people. I know I've talked in the past a lot about taking limits out because threat, fear, anger limit our beliefs about self. They're limited behaviours, fight, flight, freeze. They can disconnect us from other people. So they're a lot about contraction, disconnection, making myself smaller, imposter syndrome, low self-esteem. So again, it's making myself smaller, hiding from people. So a lot of the videos in the past have been about taking those limits away, about replacing limiting beliefs about myself with ones that I prefer to believe, with looking at my values and therefore the basis on which I make decisions about life and my behaviours, and making sure they're in alignment with who I am and that I really see my worth and value now, that I don't diminish myself, that I don't just see myself through that problem and flaw focused lens, but I see all the amazing things that I've done and do and that I'm capable of. So a lot of the past, as you know, these past videos has been about taking those limits away, because that's what threat tends to do, and reward, the addictions and dependencies, limit behaviour, limit my use of imagination. This, though, these boundaries, it is important if when I'm in relationship with other people, and also I will mention boundaries in relationship with myself, to have things that keep me safe. Other people don't know what my capacity is for how I'm going to spend my time, or the amount of work that I can do, or the amount of time I can spend on a particular thing. Only I know that. And actually, as which I'll go on to say, threat can really compromise my capacity to know what's enough for me, to know when I've reached that state of being switched off, or that state of being frightened or angry, because it means I don't look inside a lot. So how do I hold a boundary? And also then how do I communicate that? Because that may not have been part of life in the past too. So boundaries are so important. They're the brakes on a bike. You can see them as that, as a metaphor that means you can enjoy the ride, both in relationship with self and also in relationship with other people. There's all sorts of ways in which boundaries manifest internally in relationship with other people, but a very common boundaries word, and I'll use it as the example, is to say no to things, is to say, look, I can feel that my body, if I'm looking at it in my terms, I suppose, that nervous system has become dysregulated. I can't do this other thing too, and I need to be able to hold that boundary by saying no. It's the most common boundary word, I suppose, that people find difficulty with. If you're looking at boundaries and reward, that dominant reward place, and internal boundaries here, those sort of saying no to myself, what human beings have a tendency to do in life is to go for my short-term impulsivity, is to go for feeling good in the short term over my medium to long term well-being. And you can see that's perfectly encapsulated, I suppose, in the addictions and dependencies. So, things, using the example of alcohol, in the short term it's going to change my state, in the short term it will make me feel better, but in the medium to long term, as far as relationships with self, relationships with others, financial, whatever it might be, it can really cause me problems. Same with, status and going for that continuously. In the short term, it might feel good to get that bigger house or work towards that, or that promotion, but actually for what's better for me in the medium to long term, my relationships with self, relationships with other people, it may get in the way of that. So we need to hold in mind with boundaries, as far as our internal boundaries, that we do have a tendency to go for things which are going to help us to feel good in the short term. So we need to be able to say no to ourselves. That is an element of boundaries, of course. With other people, they're the lines in the sand. They're where we end and they begin. They're that sense of difference between ourselves and other people, different opinions. I feel differently about that. This is a need that I need to get met. When you do this, I feel this, it dysregulates me. All these ways are ways in which boundaries manifest. There's a boundaries inventory, which we'll come on to and is below this video, which really shows all the different ways in which boundaries can exist in life, both internally and also in relationships with other people. So what we need is boundaries that are firm enough to say no to other people when necessary, and say no to particular behaviours and communicate why, but also porous enough to let other people in and let their love in and the things that I want, and also their opinions. As I say, we have blind spots, human beings, so we do need other people's interventions. If you're looking at addictions and somebody letting me know that perhaps my relationship with a particular behaviour or substance is getting out of control, with my self-talk, it might be difficult for me to know that. So we do need other people's opinions there. We do need to be porous to others. If we've grown up in an environment where we're largely self-soothers, we may have got used to cutting ourselves off from other people there. So we do need to allow other people in. We do need to, or we don't get there, the worth and value, our worth and value reflected back off them, as I say, helping them helping us, all feels good. So there are lots of ways in connection with others that mean that we need that porousness. But we also need to be able to hold the boundary, to say no, to say thank you for that invitation, but I can't make it. Or professionally, that's thank you for thinking of me as far as that new role, that new job. It's just not something I have the capacity to do at the moment, although I appreciate you thinking of me. Threat and reward both have difficult effects on boundaries. With reward, we will cross boundaries. If you're looking at the addictions and dependencies, I will, for short-term gain, because of the compulsiveness of the addiction, probably cross over boundaries in behaviourally that are a problem for me. So they have a really adverse effect on boundaries, the addictions and dependencies. And also as far as threat and dominant threat, again, I will either be fearful, which means I don't hold boundaries. I've used the example of dominant threat, saying I don't have a huge amount of sense of myself and what I need and want. I don't know what the messages from my body are as far as whether I'm in an aroused state or in a switched off state necessarily. So how do I hold that boundary with other people? And I might be in that place of always trying to please others. I get my worth and validation by pleasing other people and through their eyes. So I might be in a situation there where I'm saying yes to everything and they don't know what my capacity is. Only I know that. But as I say, in dominant threat, I don't know that until I'm in a situation perhaps of burnout or getting very angry or in that hopeless and helpless state. Or I may get too angry. I may only put in a boundary in rage or in anger, which again doesn't really get my need met because I communicate it in a way that's difficult for the other person to hear, or I communicate it in a distorted way and I don't get my need met there. I'm left trying to sort out a problem because I say something I regret. And I will talk about that in the focus on communication later on in this video. So I may struggle to hold them, as I say, or I make them too rigid. That's the possibility there with dominant threat. So what we need to hold boundaries, if you're using the example of saying no, is to be, as ever, in this calm and alive state. If I'm in a calm and alive place, I am able to overcome my fear. And that's this saying which I quite like, which is say it even if your voice shakes. And why does your voice shake? Because you're in an agitated state. Usually you're in a fearful state or perhaps even anger. So what we need to be able to do is to remain in that calm and alive state, and in that place we're able to know what it is that we're feeling and communicate what we're feeling to somebody else, because fear isn't stopping us and we're not going to do it in anger, which is not going to get our need met. There is that interesting thing about assertiveness being not in control of other people, but actually being in control of yourself, so that you're not too fearful not to say it, and you don't say it in anger in a way that's not going to get your need met. So actually that assertiveness goes back to what I've been talking about throughout these videos, which is making sure that my nervous system is in that calm and alive place, which means I can communicate something most often a no, as I say, in the context of boundaries, whether that's communication with others, so saying no to others, or saying no to myself. As I've said about this overly aroused state of, where the fear and anger is, it's also the place of impulsivity. It's also the place of acting out on an addiction and dependency. Anger, fear, they are triggers for acting out too, let alone, as I say, there's the impulsivity there in that place. So in that calm and alive place, it's going to be much easier to say no to others and to say no to myself. So specific exercises here. As ever, the first is going to be to do an inventory of boundaries. Below this video, there is a link to a list of all the different ways that boundaries can manifest in life, both in relationship with myself and also others. So, the obvious ones of, I suppose, around time, money, holding commitments, honouring commitments, keeping confidences, but also all those interesting ones about other people. When do I take in opinions? When do I stand apart from the group? If I'm uncomfortable with something that's happening, they're all boundaries. They're all about who I am as compared to other people. But in order to hold them, we need two things. We need to know what's happening internally for us. So we need to be dropping inside as ever to look at the signals that my body's given me to say, anger is a boundary emotion, but I need to know that I'm annoyed in order to hold it, in order to show me that something's happening that I don't like, and also to communicate them. And as I say, I'm going to come on to that next. The best place from which to do that is to be in that calm and alive place. As far as creative imagination, again, one of the things which I always mention, winding the window up is a helpful thing here. So if I'm looking at distinguishing myself from another, when I'm talking to another person, to be able to be porous enough to let in the love and their opinions, but also have some sort of boundary in the way that discriminates against what's coming in as well, that's able to say no, that means that I'm not overly caretaking them and saying yes to everything because I feel guilty, or trying to overly take care of their feelings and their life. The idea of winding the window up here, people tend to find helpful. So if you imagine being in connection with another person, being in relationship, and then having a window between the two of you, as I say, it allows you to see them, to hear them, to relate to them, but it also gives you that sense of the fact that you are separate to them, and therefore their feelings are not your feelings. It is not your job to try and regulate their feelings all the time, or to make their life better all the time, if we're talking about you and another adult. So winding the window up can be helpful here. And then the image of the hands. So what we want is boundaries where they're firm enough to say no, but also porous enough to allow others in too. So the firm enough to say no can be represented by the hand held up like this, and porous enough to let others in, I suppose, an open palm. So what we need really in life is this, the capacity to do both. If you're in that dominant threat place of anger, what it will be doing a lot is this, which is saying no to everything and everyone and disconnecting and coming out of relationships, or too porous. So non-existent sense of self, don't know what I need and want. I get my worth and value from pleasing you, so I allow everything in. I don't really know who I am, so I allow all your opinions in. I just want to remain part of the group, so I'll engage in any kind of bullying behaviour that you're engaging in just to stay part of the group. So if you're looking at, which is quite a helpful one, being represented physically, this position is most helpful for us, I would say. Then looking at step 10, which is linked to boundaries really, because you can't hold boundaries in relationship with other people without communicating them. So focusing on communication here, the key point to remember is silence doesn't work in adult relationships. What can often happen for us when we're growing up, as I've already said, is that we get into a situation where we don't communicate our needs because there was no point communicating our needs. We came away from our bodies because we were in relationships with people who were that frightening, addicted, switched off. If we did communicate something, they might have invalidated it, shut it down. It may have annoyed other people. So actually, we never got into a situation where we were communicated things. So not only have we lost contact with the signals from our body sometimes, but also we don't have the language to communicate needs with another person, and we believe that they're not going to change their behaviour anyway, that attaching to somebody, being in relationship with somebody, means we have to self-soothe and get on with our own life, and they will do that too. So we don't necessarily have the trust, if that dominant threat place is around, that somebody else will change their behavior in order to meet our needs. We don't even think necessarily that we deserve better. So all of these things lead to a situation where we might be silent about our needs in adult relationships. And I'm going to focus here on romantic relationships because it can often be the one that's most similar to those caregiving relationships of childhood for us. The point is, if we want to get our needs met in relationship with others, if we want to hold boundaries with other people, we need to be able to communicate them. And of course, we can communicate things non-verbally, but that doesn't always get our needs met, and it's not a very effective way of doing it. A lot of people will communicate anger non-verbally, so with perhaps passive aggression or oppositional behaviour. So if I don't like something that my partner's done, I may just not do the thing that they want me to do around the house to show that I'm angry with them. So acting out behaviourally my anger. But what we need to hold in mind here, what's really important to hold in mind, is the most effective way to get your needs met and for you to meet somebody else's needs in relationship is for that to be communicated in language. Yes, I've already talked about the fact, of course, that we avoid short-term pain. We don't want to feel discomfort. We don't want to feel the fear and the anger. So what we'll often do is avoid short-term discomfort. So we won't say something, we'll keep it to ourselves. But if we do that, we will perhaps be maintaining and keeping in place that sort of long-term dysfunction. So although it's uncomfortable to say things in the short term, although if you're looking at boundaries, it can be uncomfortable to say no in the short term. The amygdala steps forward. We think we're going to be not liked or loved, or someone will reject us or get angry with us. If we don't do that, if we don't put in the boundary, if we don't take care of ourselves, we are left potentially with long-term dysfunction within the relationship, and certainly left with long-term dysfunction or dysregulation internally. Because if I don't take care of myself by saying that's enough for me, I can't do that piece of work, or I don't want to do that piece of work, or I don't want to attend that event because I'm tired, or I'm feeling like my plate's full, I know I'm getting dysregulated and I need to be able to take care of myself, do something behaviorally which is going to help me to feel better and regulate me, hold those kind of boundaries around self-care and my work-life balance, making sure that I'm doing the things that I enjoy as well as doing my things professionally, doing things that I love for me as well as doing things for other people. To make sure I'm holding that balance, I need to communicate that to other people, and that is potentially going to be uncomfortable. But let's try and do the uncomfortable thing in order to keep myself in a place where I'm regulated and happy, and that will in turn help the relationship anyway. That will mean that I'm able to give to others, that will mean that I'm much more able to help other people. So it's primarily about taking care of myself, but the knock-on effect of that in the medium to long term is that things will work better in relationship with another as well. So I'm going to talk about how to communicate difficulty and distress here, particularly the example of, I suppose, irritation and annoyance in relationship and romantic relationships. But let's also just emphasize the fact that what I would like to be doing a lot as far as communication is communicating connection with other people. Our tendency is to focus on the problems, but let's, as much as we can, and I've talked about it in the past, communicate to others how we value them and their worth and value to us and what we're grateful for and what we see in them that we love. All those things. Let's try and communicate those things to people as often as they can. If the thought comes into your head, I wonder what that person's doing, I wonder how they are, then let's communicate that. Really communicating those connection qualities. And then looking at the difficulty. And as I said, I'm going to use the example of feeling angry and distressed in relationship, because that's often the thing that we have a difficulty with, that when we're communicating. Holding in mind here that loneliness is about not being able to talk to other people about the things that are important to you. A lot of us would know of loneliness as far as not being around others, but of course you can be in relationship with people, a number of people, you can be living with a romantic partner, children, whoever, but feel lonely because you're not able to communicate your difficulty. Perhaps as far as growing up and what's been modeled to you is also not communicating your love verbally to others. But if we're talking in this situation about things that are difficult, if we aren't able to communicate them, if we don't feel like we're able to say something which is going to get a change in the relationship, then that does leave us lonely. So what happens when we are distressed, just running through here a number of points which I think are really helpful when looking at communicating difficulty and distress in relationship. But as I say, I'm going to focus now and use the example of something that's, say, annoying me in romantic relationship. Firstly, let's think about whether it's worth saying it with our partner. What we might have grown up a lot with during early experiences, not being able to say anything. But we might then get into a situation, we might either follow that through, or we might come out with every criticism and complaint that comes into our mind because that wasn't something we were ever able to do. What I'm saying is that we have a natural tendency, as you know by now, to do the criticism complaint, to have the problem focus. And let's try and make sure that we're communicating our love of another person more. So let's have a think about, in the context of this relationship and the long-term nature of the relationship, whether it is worth saying every difficult thing that comes into our mind, if that is something that we're doing. Of course, if there's a pattern of behaviour, then I do think it needs to be communicated. It's very important to communicate that. So, the basis on which you decide whether you communicate something is up to you, of course. But I do think patterns can be a helpful way to do that, to notice that I've got dysregulated by something a number of times, and then to say it on that basis. When we do say it, let's try to respond rather than reacting. And when I say reacting, rather than getting angry and saying it in anger, let's try and put ourselves into that calm and alive place. I'm going to talk about that a bit more in a minute. So respond to them from that place, because that's the place that we're most likely to get our need met from, because it's the place where we are most expansive, where we're able to express ourselves and hold, the goodwill that we have for them, empathise with ourselves, and really communicate in a way that's most likely to get our need met. What we want to be doing is advocating for the anger rather than speaking from it. So we don't want to be shouting at somebody. We don't want to be going in this aroused state. We want to be going in a place which has taken the message from the anger and the annoyance, the message underneath it, which is about often hurt or fear, or the fact that something seems unfair, and advocate for that place. In that place, then, that more calm and alive place, we're much more likely to say what we mean and mean what we say. The difficulty with anger is that it's a place of wanting to hurt somebody and wanting to win. And that's, as I've said, that threat place is okay if you're dealing with an actual threat to life in the short term, but it doesn't work very well in long-term relationships. If we're talking about maintaining a good communication with somebody and a good relationship with somebody else, we need to be clear about what we're saying. We don't want to be saying things that we don't mean in anger. People say to me, this person said this when they were angry, they mean it. I don't believe that, actually. Of course, there's often a kernel of truth for somebody within the anger, but if you look at the qualities of anger, victim, perpetrator, you're doing something to me, the stories that anger steps forward, the lack of empathy, the pervasive and permanence of things, you never do this, you always do that. As I say, the need and want for somebody else to bend the knee and to yield for any reasons that they might give about their behaviour, just sounding like excuses, all those things add up to me not saying things that I mean just to win. So actually, I think if somebody's angry, they don't necessarily say things that they mean. It's quite the opposite. People say things that they mean when they're in a calm and alive place, I would say. And also we need to know the difference between defending ourselves and attacking somebody. And in order to do that, we have to be in that calm and alive place when we talk to them. If I'm angry, I will most likely attack somebody verbally rather than defend myself, which is probably what I'm doing in this situation. I'm probably responding to fear, feeling threatened, the fact that something's unfair, feeling hurt. And therefore what I want to be doing is putting in a boundary and defending that, but not attacking somebody. But as soon as I've got angry, I will probably start to do the you never do this, you always do that, you're such an X. So, but that is verbally attacking someone. So let's know the difference. And the only way we can hold that difference, and I suppose hold that boundary internally here, is to maintain that state of calm and alive to the extent that that's possible. I mean, I do realise we're all human beings. We all get triggered. We can't predict what somebody else is going to say. We might not be having a great day. They might say something which taps into trauma, and therefore we get triggered, and therefore we say things we don't mean. All I'm saying is holding in mind an ideal situation here, which is that I will get my need met much more. I will take care of myself much more. I'm much more likely to hold boundaries if I keep myself in that calm and alive place. So plan it. If you do want to talk about something that's annoying you and angered you, do plan what you want to say beforehand. think it through. So you test your stories internally, test the stories of anger. Is it true? So I'm not just coming out with stuff designed to hurt the other person, or that's distorted by my by fear in imagination or anger in imagination. Try to stick to the matter in hand. As I've said, anger's aim is to sort of annihilate the other person, is to win. So it pulls in all sorts of stuff, marauds around the past. Your mother did this, your father did that, whatever. We've got to stick to the matter in hand here. So let's try to keep focused on what it is, what the effect on my body, what happened to me when this person does that, and what I would like them to do differently. So try to stick to the matter in hand, try to stick to what it was that brought you into this place of wanting to communicate with that person. In that calm and alive place, yes, try to speak gently, evenly, and with empathy. Other people, we all have mirror neurons. So if we start to escalate, if we start to get angry, there is an intrusive automatic tendency for somebody else to get angry too. We're not talking about tiptoeing around other people and avoiding saying things, but certainly we can say things in a way which is much more likely to get our need met, much less likely to trigger another human being. And the way to do that is to talk in an even and calm tone and show some kind of empathy whilst we're discussing what's happening for us as well. And when we're talking about the difficulty, let's use I. So I'm going to own my experience. If what's annoying me is that somebody's demeaning me around other people, for example, I'm going to say, rather than you always do this or you're such an X, I'm going to say that when this happens, when you talk to me like that in front of other people, I feel worried, hurt, like it's unfair, and I would like you to stop doing that. So we need to own it, make it clear that it's my experience, say what the feeling is, usually beneath the anger, which is, as I say, fear, unfairness, hurt, and then tell them what it is we would like them to do differently. And then we leave it to them. Relationships are a long game. Of course, if we hand it over to them and somebody doesn't change, then we make a decision as to whether or not we remain in relationship. But let's not engage in anger's need in that moment to win. When people hear things that can be perceived to be critical, it can trigger the amygdala part of them, which is about that defensiveness and stonewalling. So let's communicate it and understand that they may take a while for it to percolate through. But when they're in that calm and alive place, if they love us, if there is that attachment, they will try to do something differently if they understand what it is that they need to do differently. So if it's escalating as well, I would suggest bringing it to an end. As I say, I've already explained what happens when our nervous system goes up to this sort of fear and anger place. We're not listening, they're not listening, we're just trying to hurt each other. It's just tit for tat. There is no empathy. So you can imagine where that's going to go, nowhere. So let's try to bring it to an end if something is escalating, because I don't think we're going to get our need met in that situation. So to remember here, the SOBER acronym: stop, observe, breathe, expand, respond. People find this quite helpful. As I say, sober. So the S is stop, which is, rather than reacting to something, to take a bit of time, to drop inside. It's the thing that I've been looking at in the past with all this. Notice what's happening internally. Anger will push me out to try and to raise something reactively, but let's step inside, drop inside. What's happening? What's the story I'm being told here? So let's stop first and observe. The O is for observe. All the way through these videos, what I've been making clear is that we need to observe what's happening internally so we can really test those stories of threat and move more to that place of connection as well. Approaching somebody else with empathy is going to be much more likely to get our need met in a difficult situation. Certainly empathy for ourselves, but also empathy for the other person. And then breathe from the point of view of calming the nervous system. The B of sober is to breathe. So we put ourselves into that calm and alive place, that we regulate our nervous system. As I said, the best way from which to approach anything in relationship with other people. And when we breathe, when we calm our nervous system, that takes us to the E of sober, which is we can hold an expansive view. We can then, as I say, empathize with somebody else. And certainly, that's not going out to empathy first, empathize with ourselves and see that this is a difficult situation and really look at why this is a difficult situation for us, so we can explain it to another person and communicate it in the way that's most likely to get our needs met. And then finally, the R of sober, which is to respond, to distinguish from react. The reason to add responding is some people, when dominant threats around, they'll not say anything. They'll hold it to themselves if they have a difficulty, and then there'll be an outburst, and it's done reactively in a way that doesn't get their need met. And actually, they might be left trying to apologise for something subsequently. So if that's been the situation up until now, what will often happen is somebody, once there's been a blow up of the anger, they won't then revisit the situation when they're calm, because they won't want to, say, dysregulate the other person or themselves again. But it is important, if there are patterns of behaviour that are difficult in relationship, to communicate it. So to respond to my body, to respond to what my body is telling me as far as boundaries and as far as patterns that I'm having difficulty with. We do need to, as I've said, in order to avoid long-term dysfunction in a relationship, to be able to communicate that, but doing it from this place of responding rather than reacting. So choosing our moment, and that will be when I'm feeling in a calm and live place, hopefully when somebody else is as well. And in that place, I am much more likely to get my need met, which is what we're looking at here, which is what communication is for, is to communicate getting my needs met, my emotional needs met in relationship. Okay, so that's the end of Life Unlimited, 10 Steps to Real Change. Hopefully just the beginning for you in terms of what life is going to be like from this point on. I really hope you found it helpful. I really hope that you've seen all the way through the way in which that dominant threat plays, the fear, the anger, the hopeless, helpless, that distorted way of looking at ourselves and other people. Very human, very understandable, very natural, and natural tendency, but how it can really limit our lives, really limit our beliefs about ourselves, what we do behaviourally, our belief in our potential, and certainly also our belief in other people and our trust in other people. And that if we move much more to this place of connection, deliberately and consciously cultivating things, treating ourselves in a kind and loving way, doing that with other people through gratitude, taking care of our bodies, as I say, cultivating relationships with other people, really using our creative imagination for our benefit, that we can really live this life unlimited, and perhaps not even that much changes around us, but it's such a profound shift in our experience of ourselves and life, such a huge improvement in our quality of life. I really hope that that's something that you find. Do let me know what you think of the course. I genuinely love to hear your feedback about it. I am on various social media, so do please follow me on there, and I post things regularly. I also have a YouTube channel where I'm going to be have uploaded some videos, and will be uploading more videos in the future. So as I say, I really hope you found it helpful, and I do really wish you all the best with your journey. You take care.